Welcome back. I'm happy to announce that today
we'll be
is the
going over
final
the
day we'll
major
be doing
changes
full
of the last
breakdowns
two
on the
years.
status, and that's a
And
good thing because that means
Yeah, I know. Everyone and their grandmother who's better at YouTube than me has been talking about the last major update to New World. So let's talk about something that might be a little bit more fundamental to what you might want to do in the world of New World. World of New World, that sounds retarded. So the beta of New World is less than a month away at this point, and, well, the full release is less than 2 months away, unless, well...
Hi there, I'm Scott Lane.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening again. At least I hope not. So let's talk about the factions. There's 3 of them. But which one is the right one for you? Now, I know this topic is kind of beating a dead horse, but there might be some new blood we can actually get out of this. So stick around if you're interested. Now, this is a deceptively complex topic that on the surface kind of sounds really simple. So let's just knock the basics out of the way. Like I've already said, there's 3 of them, and you can form or join a company underneath one of the 3 major factions. Opposing factions get to try murder you, and you get to try murder them. That is, if you leave your PvP on. And yes, that's right, PvP is an opt-in system, no matter how much you or I cry about it. Personally, that's not what I would have wanted, but I can understand from a longevity standpoint why the devs went for this decision. And outside this little selfish bubble here, I think they made the right choice. But that's just a brief summary. We're here to figure out who these factions really are. Let's start off with the Covenant.
Oh god, no, that's my book! Watch out!
So you could describe the Covenant as the old school, Old Testament, break down your door, here comes the Spanish Inquisition type. If you would ask them what they were doing here, they'd tell you that they're here to restore this island to its state of purity, to eliminate all corruption from the island, and, in their words, prevent an apocalypse from occurring. And of course, erect a church wherever they go. And if you were to ask the other factions what they were doing here, they'd probably tell you these Bible-thumping nutcases are here to mildly inconvenience you on a Sunday and sell you those little rubber "What Would Azoth Do" bracelets. Alongside, you know, that little bit about purging the heretic. So, if you keep your virginity intact because you choose to, not because you have to, well, then this might be the faction for you. Moving on. Ah yes, the spooky plague boys. They're not here to heal you of the Black Plague. Nothing like that. They're more the isolate you and study your body while it deteriorates into nothing before learning how to weaponize it kind of people. So if you were to get your hands on one of these Illuminati members and ask them what they were doing on Eternum, they'd probably tell you that they're here seeking secret knowledge. Well, not much else because they're pretty secretive. Their entire point, the way they see it, is to start a new age of enlightenment by seeking out, finding, and understanding as much knowledge as possible. To them, knowledge is power. And currently they see the world as pretty powerless, so they're here to fix that. Now if you were to ask one of the other factions, they'd probably call them a bunch of bookish nerds who got lost on their way to the library. And to these guys, your life is only worth as much as the amount of knowledge you bring back to them and are willing to share with them. The curious part about them wanting to start an age of enlightenment is that they're not very willing to share any of that information. So if you find that you're one of those people who are the pure embodiment of actually, and nothing out there matters to you quite as much as a good book, well then maybe the spooky plague boys are for you. Also furries. And then finally, in my absolutely fair and completely balanced opinion that is totally unbiased, we have the worst faction in the game. So to understand the Marauder, you first have to understand something about piranhas. Their brains are generally very small, and if you find one, there's a million lurking somewhere in the shadows. The worst thing you can do with one of them is show any form of weakness, because they will swarm you, and they will take you out at the first opportunity they get. Generally speaking though, they're pretty harmless, and despite being the largest faction, they tend to be the least coordinated, unless they're being directed by a higher power at the time. Now, if you were to crack open that ant's nest and find one of them, have a conversation, if possible, they'd likely tell you that they're here on Eternum to establish a new nation of free people, who are free from the bonds of previous lives. This is a land that should belong to the strong, the brave, the honorable, the great fighters who are able to take control of any situation that there's no higher ideal than strength itself, the steel in your spine and the swing of your sword arm, and above all else, oil. Oil. You know which part of the map I'm talking about. They wouldn't leave it alone. Now, if you were to ask one of the more reasonable Syndicate or Covenant members about the Marauders, they would call them a roving band of savages and mercenaries. Animals who are here to just rip the land apart, destroy everything, use everything, before moving on to something better. So if strength is your highest ideal, and if you like fighting on the winning side of 100v1 fights, well, then maybe Marauders for you. If you had decided that you were going to pick a faction based on lore reasons, well, there you go. Now you know which one of the shiny 3 colors you get to choose from. But we're not done quite yet. These are not the only factions in the game. These are simply the playable factions. There's also the Ancients, the Corrupted, the Drowned, I forget their name. I'm sure they're going to add a whole bunch more as the game develops and progresses. But the focus of this video is on what faction you should choose and how they interact with one another. These 3 factions work together in something they call the Discordant Trinity, which basically means they can't agree on shit, making them a loose alliance to fight back the forces that would otherwise not have them there and take control of Eternum for themselves. Primarily, your factions start on the shores, and we're moving inland towards the greater threats that have already established themselves more than we have. You might be asking yourself, now what do I get for joining this one faction that I wouldn't get from joining another? Well,
You get nothing!
just kidding. Kind of. This is the part that worries me a bit. From what I've seen and what I know, there's not actually that much distinction between the 3 factions. I really hope that over time we get to see more variation between each of them, secret locations, and maybe specific quests. Maybe a few exclusive items for your house that relate to your faction. For now though, it just seems the difference between them is that you get a unique dye pack that you can put on your gear. But since the New World team has proven amenable to listening to its community, this might be coming at a later date, so just keep that in mind. But then what do you get that makes it worthwhile joining a faction? What you get is the opportunity to compete against different factions in a 50v50 battle for control of a particular region, where the winning team decides what the local settlement should be working on to further develop and upgrade, what the tax rates are, what color their section of the map ends up getting painted, alongside some faction-wide buffs and price benefits. Last few things you should probably be aware of is that you can sign up for your faction after hitting level 10, you can't declare war on a company that falls under the same faction as you, there is an underdog mechanic in place for whichever faction is going to end up being the least populated. Spoilers, it's going to be Covenant, but there's not too many specifics on how this works, so we'll have to find that out as the game develops. Most importantly for people to know though, is that you're not locked into a singular faction for your entire playthrough. You don't have to re-roll a new character anymore. But this does come with a few caveats. First, you're not allowed to change to the faction that has the most territory under control. Second, you can only change your faction every 120 days for about 100 Azoth. So that's about 3 times a year. And thirdly, you will lose your faction rank and all your tokens upon switching to a new faction. So now at least you no longer have to worry about accidentally hitting that Marauder button when you meant to hit the Covenant one. So it's a common mistake. So by no means have I managed to cover absolutely everything about factions in this video, so let me know in the comments below about any of the interesting points I may have missed out on, but hopefully this video helps you out a bit in picking the right faction for you. If you do still feel a little bit lost, I'll leave a link down below in the description to a faction quiz that Amazon made for you, which might help you decide which faction you belong in. So as always, big thank to all my subscribers, old and new. You guys are the reason I'm going to keep on pumping this site full of my garbage content. It's particular moments like this and this as to why I'm going to keep uploading and hopefully get better at this over time. If you're wondering why I'm in a new space after making that special about setting up an entirely new room, well, that's kind of because I lost my house. So yeah, once I'm back in a rhythm, once I've got everything sorted, hopefully things will be a little bit more consistent. Anyway, thanks for getting this far in the video. I appreciate you. Cheers.